How's it going, everyone? Welcome to the February 16th edition of Octagon Outlook. I'm your host, James Lynch. We have a very special co-host joining us here today. You know her as the UFC strawweight, Ashley Yoder, joining us here. Ashley, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Hey, it's great to talk to you. Normally, we do the show on Mondays. We had family day here in Vancouver, so had to take the day off, spend some time with my wife and my kids. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in to this episode. We're going to be talking all things UFC 258, recapping the card and all that. Just before we get into that, if you're watching this, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, easy way to support the channel. But what a pay-per-view this was on Saturday night. A lot to get into, Ashley. I know you tuned in. Kamaru Usman in the main event gets the TKO finish over Gilbert Burns in the very third round. I thought that was probably one of Kamaru Usman's best performances in the Octagon. What did you think of that performance? I think people were picking Usman in the fight, but to see him get a finish like that over a former teammate, very impressive.
Yeah, I also believe that's the same case for me. I do believe that, like you, in any of Usman's fights, his last fight might have not been his best performance, and the fact of being fun and everybody was kind of rooting for the underdog in that fight. This fight really changed the pace for him. He looked so good in this fight from the start to the finish, and I mean, even looking at his face after, if you look at the pre-conference or post-conference like interviews, literally his face didn't look like it was touched. And as you saw, Gilbert Burns' face did not look the same.
Yeah, no, it didn't. I don't know if you've ever had that situation where you've had to fight like a teammate or former training partner. Like, I do wonder how much that played into the fight as well. Not taking anything away from Usman, but it is kind of an interesting thing where they have trained together. I'm sure they knew who was getting the better of those exchanges. Have you ever had that before?
Absolutely. I mean, I haven't had to do that, but I've been with people that have had to make those decisions. It's funny. It's such a hard place to be, right? Because you want to take that fight. They're at a level where you're going to have to face each other at some point. You're the contender and champion of that weight class. So it's something I'm sure before they got to that point that they realized that that would be a potential, and they probably had to think about that. But watching the interviews and seeing some of the guys talking about how their team was taking sides, like you don't want to see that. A team is such a family and it's so personal, and you go through war together, and it's just a different aspect. And if you're in the martial arts game and you fought before, you understand that. So I'm sure it was very hard.
A lot of implications coming out of this fight. Mainly, where does Kamaru Usman fit in terms of one of the all-time greats at welterweight? It's an interesting discussion. He's defended the title. I want to say he's 3 times now, right? He won the title over Woodley back in 2019. He's now had 3 successful title defenses, 2 finishes now. Late finish over Colby Covington, the finish over Burns, and then the decision win over Masvidal. Is it too early to have that conversation? I mean, he's yet to lose in the UFC, and if you look at a guy like GSP, he had a lot more title defenses, but Usman also hasn't lost in the Octagon. What do you think of that talk? I know it's a little ambiguous, but what do you think of that?
I mean, Dana White said it himself. He's going to go down as one of the best in history. And, this guy's been in the game for before I even knew what fighting was. So, you got to kind of have to trust what this man says on that side of it. I do believe that he's definitely on that road. Of course, you want to see him fight more. You want to see him have that resume built for his Hall of Fame credentials at the end of his career. So, I definitely think if, get a couple more defenses, and then hey, you know what they do, they move up. So move up and fight in the next weight class. So I think it would be a great opportunity for him just to pave his way for one of the greatest of all time.
And first loss at welterweight for Gilbert Burns. I think there's a lot of options out there right now. There's a lot of moving pieces that need to happen. You've got, Colby Covington out there. You've got Leon Edwards, who just lost his opponent March 13th. You've got Michael Chiesa, who's, really a surging, welterweight in that division right now. So I think there's a lot. I think regardless, even though Burns lost this fight, he's in a good spot. We've seen guys like Colby and, other fighters that have lost to Usman, have, still high profile fights. So I think Burns is in a good spot regardless. By the way, did you see that video of him greeting his kids at the airport? Did you happen to see that? I know you're
I didn't see that. I didn't.
Yeah, it was great. Just like the embrace, and obviously, he'd been away from his family for fight week, so that Gilbert's such a nice guy. He'll be back. I don't think his I don't think his stock went down per se. I mean, he got finished by a great welterweight in the main event, a former training partner. There's a lot of emotion that goes into that. These guys have been on the mats for a long time, so I think Gilbert Burns still in a good spot there. But great main event, great way to end the pay-per-view, which I thought turned out pretty good overall in terms of what we saw on paper. I have some thoughts on Usman and what's next. There's some rumblings. We'll get into that after we sort of break down the rest of this card here. But the co-main event, Alexa Grasso getting the decision win over Maycee Barber. Grasso looks really great in the weight class now at flyweight. Of course, she moved up a couple fights ago. Maycee Barber, another loss there. Still only 22 years old. But what did you think of this fight?
So I'm very impressed with, well, I already knew I had Alexa Grasso picked before the fight even started. I think she is so underestimated with her Mexican boxing style that, people just because you have to be well-rounded in martial arts doesn't mean that you can't be especially great in one thing. And I think she really has a well-roundedness on top of being a really great Mexican boxer. So I think I already knew that she was going to destroy Maycee, but it wasn't necessarily a destroy, but I think Maycee just needs to grow. It takes time. It's mat time. At the end of the day, you have to be able to endure these losses and grow from them. And, unfortunately she's had them back to back, but I think she's only going to come out stronger.
And in hindsight, I do wonder the UFC's move here. I mean, I think if this was Grasso fighting, someone else in that division, I don't know if they get the co-main event treatment. I think it's because of Maycee that they're really trying to, make something happen with her, sort of this youngest champion sort of thing. I mean, that's kind of out the window at this point. But, I do wonder, looking back now, why the UFC went this route with Maycee, because she had the really bad knee injury against Roxanne. She's coming off her first loss. Like, you're giving her a co-main event to come back to against someone in Grasso who I think is a bit underrated. In hindsight now, kind of looks like a bad move on the UFC's part. And the other thing I'll talk about is that, Maycee I think she's one of those fighters who's still sort of growing in the cage, right? She's only 22. I already see people writing her off, saying she's a bust, whatever. I mean, she's 22. Last time I checked, Max Holloway went 4-3 to start his UFC career. So I think people writing her off too early or not really, in the right mind there. But as far as Grasso, huge win for her now. That's 3 of her last 4, 2 in the weight class. This has definitely got to propel her up. And even if you look at her losses, Carla Esparza, Tatiana Suarez, those are some of the top strawweights as well in that weight class. And she's since moved up. So where do you see Grasso going from here? I think it's just nothing but up. And this is a good win for her.
I think the UFC needs to keep giving her the opportunities to showcase her striking. We know that styles makes fights. And as you said, 2 of her losses were against some of the best wrestlers ever, not only just in the UFC, in life. So I definitely think for Grasso, just keep building her on, giving her the right fights, let her just use this momentum to showcase her skills. And then, I think she's going to come to the top, very quickly.
What do you think of this fight? Because I thought of this as soon as she lost her last fight, but I know, she's highly ranked, but Jessica Eye, I mean, she just lost to Joanne Calderwood. I think at this stage in her career, Eye's already fought for the title. Do you think that's a fight that makes sense for Grasso? Grasso was, co-main event at this card. She's on her way up. Eye is a veteran. I think that, the matchmaking kind of makes sense because I think to a certain degree, Grasso is still a prospect. What do you think of that matchmaking?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a great matchup. And that's the kind of fighter that she needs to be fighting. She needs to be fighting that's also someone that's well-rounded. A vet like Jessica Eye is a name for Alexa. Alexa already has her name out there, but it just will only propel her into the top rankings to get that contendership. So.
And for Maycee, I think it's a bounce back fight here. No rush to get her back in there. Give her lots of time, get back in there. Again, we've seen fighters that are young that don't pan out because they've just been given bad matchmaking throughout their career. I think the UFC's got to be very careful here. They've obviously put a lot in Maycee. They're giving her a lot of opportunities, whether it's, card placement or, just being like a guest, fighter at an event. I mean, I see her. I remember there was a point in 2019, she was almost at every event, it seemed, doing media. So I think they got to give her someone a little bit lower ranked, someone she can get her confidence back with. But Grasso, like I said, in hindsight, I think it was a bad move on the UFC's part, just because, now you've got a fighter who you built up who's now lost 2 in a row. It's tough to sort of build them back up, but that would be my thinking there as well. Do you agree? And do you think time off is needed for Maycee, or do you think get her back in there sooner? What are your thoughts? Because it didn't look like she took a ton of damage in that fight.
I definitely think she needs to get back in there. If she is not injury free, ring rust is a real thing. Her being young and not having the experience of maybe being able to fight with this no crowd type environment. And, some of us excel, some of us it's the same, some of us it doesn't matter. But these are things that you have to take into account for, those kind of moves. If she wants to get back in there and wants to, redeem her name, she has to do that soon. I don't think time off is the answer.
And yeah, I'll have some more thoughts on Maycee once we wrap up this card here. But the other big fight on this card, Kelvin Gaslam, Ian Heinisch. It is Kelvin Gaslam getting the decision victory over Ian Heinisch. Gaslam needed this fight, Ashley. I mean, he was on a 3-fight losing streak heading into this one, and granted, against tough competition like Israel Adesanya and, Jack Hermanson and Darren Till. But he really needed this. Heinisch, I thought, put out a good effort, but ultimately Gaslam still showing that I think he's still a top middleweight in the division. What was your takeaway from his performance?
Doesn't Ian train in Colorado?
He does, yeah. So he's been kind of bouncing around a bit because if you remember, he's a long-time member at Factory X. He had left. He went to go train at Genesis, and then he, for this last camp, actually spent a bit of time at Elevation Fight Team with, those great fighters over there like Curtis Blades and Gaethje and all them. So yeah, Heinisch, I think is, he's no longer at Factory X. That's the main thing.
And Colorado, the altitude alone is going to help him. What I'm thinking and what I was trying to lead to is possible coronavirus. delay in respiratory. I know, like, you see all these fighters that are still struggling. I know personally people that are regular athletes, regular people that aren't in the UFC, that have had a long time recovering when they have these respiratory issues with the coronavirus. Not using that as an excuse. I'm really proud of Kelvin Gaslam. One, he hired a mental coach. It's something I've done in the last now year. And I think it just is a game changer for a lot of athletes that, it's still new to them. But, I'm working with GSP's mental coach, and
Oh, you really? Awesome.
yeah, it's a game changer. You literally have to look at fighting as two parts, right? We always say it's bigger mentally than physically, but at the end of the day, a lot of people neglect that mentality, and it's really important that we kind of stress that. And I think Kelvin Gaslam really showed that it's paying off. So.
Something you touched on there as well is about COVID and how it affects people differently. Julian Arosa, who's fighting this weekend, who I know is also part of your management team, he told me that it took his lungs, he said, 6 to 8 weeks to get like just to normal. It affects everyone differently. Again, we're none of us are doctors here, but it is interesting to hear certain athletes just still have issues with their lungs. So this COVID thing is no joke, and it affects everyone differently. And yeah, it could have been that issue because, like you said, Heinrich trains at elevation, like his cardio should be on point, but you never know with COVID, right? Because I believe he was. Or he did end up getting it at some point. I remember. So that's actually what knocked him out of the. He was supposed to fight Brendan Allen last year, and that's what got the fight rescheduled. But yeah, like I said, Gaslam, big win here. I think that puts him back in the driver's seat. I might even look at maybe the winner of him and Kevin Holland coming up here. That's a pretty big fight in that division. Obviously, the other big fight is Till and Vettori, but he just fought Till, and Vittori's his teammate, so they're not going to fight. I think Whitaker Cost is a little bit ahead of them in terms of that as well. So I think maybe the Brunson and Kevin Holland winner, I think would make some sense there. And for Heinisch, same sort of thing, ranked opponent, but maybe not someone, too high up there. What do you think of those options?
Yeah, I definitely think winner should be going to. That's a great matchup either way for winner loser matchups on this card. But and I don't want to give anybody excuses, for the coronavirus. I just want to state that it's something that came to my mind when I was watching
everyone differently. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But I agree. I think, Kelvin still needs to, he was a champion. You can't just give him someone that's too low on the list, but you definitely want to see him be able to get a couple wins under his belt again and get that streak and confidence back. So yeah, I agree with these matchups, and the winners of the Kevin Holland Brunson fight would be a great matchup for Kelvin Gaslam.
And then in the featherweight division, we had two bantamweights fight on the main card, Ricky Simone and Brian Kelleher. Brian Kelleher, a friend of the show, a former co-host. I'm sure we'll get him on again in the future, but it's Ricky Simone getting the unanimous decision in this one. Simone looked great in this fight. It's really cool to see him sort of, continue his evolution as a martial artist. He had that one sort of setback a few fights ago against Uriah Faber, but since then he's looked great. This is a big win for him. And I like the fact that we saw two bantamweights fight at 45. We're seeing them at their best, essentially. There's no weight cut. I know both guys are a little bit bigger for the weight class, but I thought this was a great performance by Ricky Simone, who also is under your management company as well.
Yeah, man, he's really coming along. He's getting a lot of mat time too. He's getting fights regularly, and I think that's important too. It goes unnoticed that if we can have the opportunity to fight, every 4 months, every 3 months, it's a game changer, and it just gets you more comfortable, more confident, and I think that's what you really saw in Ricky Simone.
And then the other fight to kick off the main card, we got a lot to talk about this, not just the fight itself, but some of the stuff that happened after. But Julian Marquez, how about this? He's down 2-0 against Maycee Barber, ends up coming back and getting the submission win. This is why I love watching MMA, because stuff like this can happen all the time, whether it's a comeback or anything. And that's why you like having the 3 rounds here. But huge win for Marquez. Like, for those who don't know, he hasn't fought since 2018. He almost had to retire due to injury. He comes back here down 2-0 and gets a big win like this. How cool was that performance, seeing him get that victory over Maycee Barber?
It was great. That submission was at almost the end of the third, right? It was
it was 4:17 of round 3. Like, that's almost the equivalent. I know you're a football fan of doing a Hail Mary at the end, so.
Man, so that alone, it gives me goosebumps. It's such an awesome thing to see the underdog overcome all these adversities, right? So I think with Julian Marquez, him having the time off, he was also supposed to fight. He had an issue with his opponent being able to drop out. I think he was maybe supposed to be on my card.
He was, Safarov. And Safarov had a bad weight cut or something, so they canceled the fight.
So they canceled the fight. So, on top of being finally ready to come back, getting that taken away the last minute, I think, that's not easy for any of us. Your mind's everywhere. So, maybe it just took him a couple of rounds and, to get back into the swing of things. And hey, you can't count anyone out until the final bell, because submissions are always there. And that's a part of MMA. It's, it's part of it.
I think for Julian, depending on how he's feeling the rest of the week, we're actually going to be talking to him here on Wednesday here on the Line Movement channel. But I think get back in there as soon as you can. If you're healthy, get that momentum going, get that lost time back. This is a huge win. Make some adjustments, keep going forward. I think that's a good move for him. And for Pitolo, I don't think he's going to get cut. I would hope he doesn't. I mean, it's another loss from here because he's exciting. And let's be honest, he was winning this fight. I mean, had he not, had Marquez not got this to the ground, it was his decision win for the taking here. But that's kind of what I'm thinking next for both fighters. What's your assessment on post-fight for both these guys?
Well, yeah, like I said, I think it's so important for Julian to keep this momentum and try to get back in there, which he will. At least I believe, as long as he's not injured from this fight, which he looked completely fine. I think for the UFC's in a tight spot right now. We have a lot of fluctuation and of active fighters, and I do know that it's a tight job right now. It's going back to loser goes home. So who knows? Hopefully, they keep him, and like you said, he was winning the majority of that fight. So you can't count this guy out.
After the fight, and so glad we got you here on the program here today, Ashley, because I need a woman's perspective on this. So if this has been the talk of the internet. This is getting more play than Usman's win on Saturday night. So Julian Marquez obviously, does the call out to Miley Cyrus after the fight. Miley replies on Twitter, and then Julian, in kind of like a joking manner, because she basically said, "Hey, can you shave MC on your chest with your chest hair, right?" As like sort of like a way to get the Valentine going, Miley Cyrus with the initials there. So Julian replies and says, "Can you get and I always butcher this. It's not like a permanent tattoo. It's like the right on one. You know what I'm saying though? But he said
henna.
To get one. Yeah, exactly. You got it. You know it better than I do. To do that, I thought Julian played this great. A lot of people are giving him crap. I hear Ariel Helwani saying that, or I think it was DC or someone saying this guy's probably never had a girlfriend. From a female's perspective, what did you think here? Because I thought he was kind of saying, look, like, I'm not going to, I'm not a total pushover. He's just having fun with it. I think people saying he's fumbled the ball. What was your take when you saw that?
Well, I mean, you are talking about Miley Cyrus. She's one of the most talented people out there. And the fact that, you use your platform to really and this isn't the only thing he did that night to use his platform. He was pushing his out of his other job, doing his app or website about the marketing. He did a really great job with that. If he really kind of just slid that in there really casually. But, I think it's funny. It's just a joke, I'm sure, back and forth, like she was just joking. He just wanted her to put not even a real tattoo, a fake tattoo, henna tattoo of his fight name on her. So I think it's playful, and I don't think people should giving him she replied, so clearly she thought it was funny. So.
Exactly. And as far as I know, they're still talking or whatever, but a lot of people are saying he blew it. Like, as a woman, if a guy's trying to, be a little playful, give you a little bit of that challenge, like, is that not something that makes you a little bit more enticed? Like, had he said, like, absolutely, let's go, like, I think 99% of men would have done. I think, yeah, I'm sure she would have been cool with it too, but he kind of added a little spin on this. I don't think he ruined his chances here as a guy who's, done the dating thing. I mean, I'm happily married now. I'm going to be coming up 10 years with being with my wife, but, in terms of dating, but it's one of those things where I like the fact he played a little bit of a challenge there. What did you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think she's dating someone, isn't she?
She could be, yeah.
I could be wrong. Yeah,
Oh, that's right. That's right. Well, there you go.
Yeah. So, yeah, she could be. Who knows? But either way, it was really funny, and he used his platform in the right way. And at the end of the day, it's all good publicity if it's any publicity. So, now people are hearing his name. It basically went viral. I can't get on my Explore page without having Julian and Miley Cyrus on there now. So, good. I think it's awesome for him.
I do as well. And I think had he not done that, this wouldn't have been such a big thing. I think people would be like, oh, good for you. But now you got all these MMA Twitter people turning into like MMA relationship experts and being like, I can't believe he did that. And I'm sitting back and I was telling my producer Jordan the same thing. Like before we got on here today, I said, I thought he well, like, I don't know what people are like. Have you never dated before? Like, this is what you do. You have fun with it. If he just would have come out and said, I'm going to do whatever you want, it's going to look desperate. You listen, right. You're a woman, you don't want a guy who's too desperate, right?
Yeah. You have to be confident, man. That's it. And someone like Miley Cyrus, she's not going to handle anything less. So
There you go. You heard it from Ashley Yoder. That's important stuff there. Let's go through the rest of the card. Not going to spend too much time on this, but another big fight on this card was on the prelims. Anthony Hernandez, who, if I'm not mistaken, was the biggest underdog on this card, coming through and getting a second round submission victory over a Rodolfo Vieira. What's so impressive of this is not only the fact that Anthony got the finish on the fact that he, upset this big favorite, but it's that he beat him at his own game. I mean, this guy was thought of as like, the next coming of Damian Maia, so to speak, and Hernandez gets it done. What did you think of this performance? I thought it was outstanding game plan by Anthony and his team.
Absolutely. I think the game plan was exactly what they needed to do. And if you're confident in your jiu-jitsu, like, why not use it? If just because someone's labeled as a Damian Maia, you don't have to actually not go that route. It goes back to people compete in jiu-jitsu. So like, there's a reason for that. And I think it was a great game plan. And he probably caught him off guard because he wasn't expecting him to match him at his own game.
And I think it was really the perfect storm here, where you have a guy in Vieira who's looked outstanding, but, again, people didn't think he could be beat. Well, guess what? He can be beat. And I think with Anthony Hernandez, I think people overlooking him a little bit, right? He lost to Kevin Holland in his last fight, but Kevin Holland's been on quite the roll lately. I think you got to look at the overall resume instead of just saying, oh, this guy's got a bad ground game. Like, Fluffy has submission wins. It's not that this was just something unique to this fight. And also think it really helped that we found out after the fact is that he really upped his strength and conditioning. And you saw his conditioning play a role in this fight where he was much fresher. Vieira looked tired. I mean, it was one of those things where, I think he just expected to take out Hernandez in the first round, and that's a bad mistake. We've seen that in not just this fight, but you remember last year with the Maria Agapova fight when she fought Shawna Dobson, same sort of thing. She thought she was going to get that first round finish. She had a complete adrenaline dump. Dobson took advantage and got the win. Similar thing, similar odds on the fight as well too. So huge win for Anthony Hernandez. We just had him on the Victory Loves Company podcast this morning just before I hopped on here. He says he wants to take some time. He's got to get his hand checked. But if you're the UFC, like I said, when you get upsets like this, I think you got to book them as soon as you can and keep that momentum going. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think that's a key point in making yourself your own star. The UFC has their kids that they kind of push to the stardom. And if you have the opportunity to kind of push yourself to the stardom, take that every opportunity.
I agree. Also on the prelims, we had Bilal Muhammad get a win over Diego Lima. Dominant win here for Bilal Muhammad. A lot of people sort of talking after this fight, when's Bilal going to get a step up? Well, he had a step up against Sean Brady. I don't know why they didn't rebook that fight. Brady's now fighting Jake Matthews coming up here a little bit later. Maybe because they already had made this fight before with Lima and it didn't end up happening. But it's time for Bilal to get a good opponent here. One of the best follows on Twitter as well, Bilal Muhammad. What did you think of his performance?
I actually missed that fight. I was on my way to go watch the fight, so I was.
Oh, good. Yeah, it was dominant. Yeah, no, it was a
Nice.
totally dominant win there. Now 18-3 overall. Diego Lima back to the drawing board, but still, I think Bilal Muhammad's kind of been one of those dark horses in the division, so we'll be keeping tabs on that. Fight in your division, I don't know if you caught this one, but Polyana Viana, who's actually the betting underdog, getting a first round submission armbar over Mallory Martin, who's out of Elevation Fight Team. Big win there for the Brazilian. She's now 12-4 overall, but she had a bit of a losing streak prior to this. She actually was losing 3 straight fights. She lost to JJ Aldrich, Hannah Cyphers, and Veronica Macedo, and then is now rebounded with back-to-back first-round submission wins via armbar. That's her thing these days. Emily Whitmire, now Mallory Martin. I'm sure you heard about this fight. I don't know if you caught it, but what'd you think of that performance?
I did. I caught that actually as right before I was leaving my house to go to the fights. But no, yeah, I think it was. She's a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. I think she's really finding her key. The thing is, if people understand that Emily Whitmire and Mallory Martin, sorry, I kept saying I want to say Miranda. Oh, no. Mallory Martin, they're both pretty decent in jiu-jitsu and they've had finishes. So I think it's something to be said that this finish meant a lot for her in her winning. And, someone said it the best, like she won't be denied. She was going so relentless for the same, Mallory made a mistake by catching her leg and letting her get in a good position. And from there, if you trust your jiu-jitsu, and she kept fixing and adjusting and, just making those micro adjustments in her game that it literally allowed her to get the finish. And, I watching that, I saw a couple of like spots where, I felt like Mallory could have capitalized on maybe not getting in any worse position. But, fights are fights. We all get in those positions, and get submitted by people that necessarily. I'm not saying that she's not better than her in jiu-jitsu. But, sometimes when you're in the fight game and that adrenaline's going and you're not thinking properly, there's a couple of times that I felt like there could have been an escape, but it didn't happen. So,
are you looking at her as a potential opponent just in terms of the rankings and all that? Or are you looking for someone a bit higher?
I just want to fight. Right now it's kind of crazy with the UFC, and I want to get back in there as soon as possible. And it sounds like it's maybe not going to be as soon as possible, but so I'll take whoever they want to give me. Yeah.
And by the way, I saw your last opponent, Miranda Granger, is going to be she's going to be a mom. I don't know if you caught that.
Oh yeah, I definitely did. She reposted one of our pictures of us being entangled with each other and
Oh, right.
made a
That,
little
yeah.
I'm not the father. Yeah. So I told her I dodged a bullet, and I congratulated her. That's a huge thing in your life, and I wish her the best and a healthy pregnancy. So
There you go. We got 2 more fights on this card. This was a catch weight because of the short notice. Chris Gutierrez, Andre Ewell. Gutierrez getting the win here. A little bit of revenge as well. If you remember last year, Ashley, they had that UFC, I think it was 247 card with the bad judging in Texas. It was in February of last year. And one of the fights on there that I think a lot of people felt should have gone the other way was Jonathan Martinez, who's actually Gutierrez's teammate, losing to Andre Ewell. So Gutierrez getting a bit of revenge, getting a win here and taking advantage of a short notice opportunity. I thought this was a great win for Chris Gutierrez. Andre Ewell back to the drawing board, but Gutierrez continuing to surprise and really show his rise in the bantamweight division. I know next fight will be at 135, but what'd you think of this fight?
what was that weight class at? Was it
so this was a catch weight of 140. I mean, they're bantamweights though.
Because it was last minute fight.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I didn't catch the weigh-in, so I didn't know that there was a little bit of a catch weight.
A lot of people didn't know. Yeah. That's all good.
And as much as like from the outside looking in, that doesn't seem like a lot. It could been if one guy's a lot bigger naturally walking around than the other guy who's already prepared to cut the weight. So but I mean, I'm always about the sweet revenge story of getting back for your teammates. So that karma is going to always be bigger than we are. So
sure.
Congrats on his victory, though. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was great. And then opening up the card, we had a welterweight fight. Gabe Green getting his first UFC victory. I know Gabe's a Cali guy like yourself in terms of training out in California. I know California is very big, but yeah, big win for him. Getting the decision over Philip Rowe. A bit of I saw some people sort of have different scorecards on this one, but I'm looking on MMA decisions right now. It looks like the majority of media members did score that fight for Green. Not the most exciting fight in the world, but Gabe Green getting his first win. Philip Rowe losing. Rowe now 7-3, but Rowe had a pretty big layoff coming into this fight. I was just going to double check. When was the last time he had fought going into this one? Yeah, it was it was actually his debut because he had fought Leon Shabazian on Contender Series in 2019. So he had like 3 fights that had been mixed around. So that's tough to come back to, right? And fight a guy in green who had a really good debut against Daniel Rodriguez. Didn't go his way, but obviously needing that first UFC victory. So it is what it is. But good on Gabe Green for getting that first win. I'm guessing you didn't see that one either.
No, I watched a little bit of it. It was a lot of striking, right? So yeah. I heard Green's from Riverside, I believe, right? Correct. Yeah. So I watched I was back and forth watching the TV and fixing dinner and stuff, so I wasn't really like engaged in if you have your volume on the TV and you hear the commentators not say and you hear you don't hear the commentators like, oh, like you're just hearing the talk of like them trying to kind of fill in those gaps. I wasn't really walking back into the TV, so I did miss that one. I did know that the guy, he was from Riverside. So I was like, oh, I don't know where he trains, but I'm guessing Millennia because that's pretty much one of the only Riverside gyms, I believe, right?
Yes. But. Yeah, I believe I have to double check where he's training, but it's somewhere out there, I think. And yeah, I think people don't realize, like for people like us who are on Pacific time zone, like these fights are on at like 4:00. So sometimes you're out, like I know with me, it's like I still got to do dinner and stuff with my son. So I kind of I'll like PVR it, and then sometimes I'll go watch it like while there's like other stuff going on, and then like catch up. That's kind of how I do it as well. So I'm like you, I can't always tune in live to every single fight. So yeah, really good card overall. We talked about the main event there, and already we're hearing talk of Kamaru Usman and Jorge Masvidal, the rematch as potentially being next and potentially them doing the Ultimate Fighter. I did not catch Colby Covington's interview this morning on Submission Radio, so I wasn't sure what he had to say to it, but I just don't think there's a need to do this rematch right now. Like I get it, Kamaru Usman is the champ. He has a lot of leverage right now. He hasn't lost in the UFC. He had a great dominant performance on Saturday night, and I know the guy wants to get paid. From a fan's perspective, I just don't see that fight going any differently. And to me, it's like it's not needed to do this rematch between Usman and Masvidal right now. I know they're pushing that. I know they want them to be the tough coaches. That's sort of the idea there, but I just don't think there's a need to do this when a guy decisively wins the first fight. Look, if there's a lucky punch or a quick finish or there's a controversial decision, then I'm all about the rematches. But I mean, Masvidal has not fought since that fight. Usman only has the one win over Burns. I just don't think there's a need to do this rematch right away. And yes, it would be interesting to see Masvidal on tough, but do him and Colby. Put the money together. Let's make that happen. That's a much more interesting tough show, in my opinion, with Colby and Masvidal, the former teammates, same division. Let Usman fight someone else. Wonderboy Thompson got a big win in December over Jeff Neal. He's sort of on the horizon there in terms of a title shot. Leon Edwards lost his opponent on March 13th against Khamzat Chimaev. The guy's on an 8-fight win streak. Leon Edwards' last loss was to Usman, which was back in 2015. I think now's the time anytime you could do that rematch. But I just think right now, there's just not, like, from a fan's perspective, I just don't want to see Masvidal and Usman again. I know Masvidal will play the whole role of, well, I took the fight on short notice. It wouldn't have made a difference. Usman's a superior wrestler. Masvidal's a striker. The wrestler, style-wise anyways, sort of wins that fight. So wanted to get your thoughts on this, Ashley. Do you think it's time to do Usman and Masvidal next?
I was actually really interested when they said that they're possibly going to be the tough coaches, just because of the trash talk that they've had. They have a history of trash talking, right? But you definitely have a great point in saying Colby Covington would be money on money right there. It's like trash talking to its fullest. If you added Conor McGregor in the mix, it'd be like a whole show of like Jerry Springer. So I'm just saying, like, I know, as being on a show like Tough and they're bringing it back, they need that spice. They need that dramatic slash, kind of hated teammate. That's a great backstory for Tough to be coming back to the UFC. It's on a new channel. It's going to be a completely different vibe, I'm sure. But I also believe that it would have been a great fight to do. I do agree. I think if the fight was to continue, it would be the same thing. We're going to see a lot of cage fighting. There's not going to be a lot of outside brawling, just because you're not going to let someone win at their own game, right? Especially if you're the champ defending, that's a possibility of one shot knockout. We don't know, you one wrong slip or movement or a fake, these are things that you have to take into account. I think Leon Edwards would be a really fun fight for Usman. I really do. I think, him losing his fight, how many times is this now? Like twice, 3 times?
Yeah.
He's lost his fight a lot. So I think it would be a great matchup. And hey, worst case scenario, have them fight before the show. The show's not going to be airing for a while. So you have a couple months, get him back in there, let him fight again. If he wants Masvidal, do that. There's a lot of possibilities that can go with this. And I think either way, it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, just 2 more quick things. Producer Jordan coming in the clinch here. He says basically Colby didn't want when you say Neal, I'm assuming Jeff Neal, and he said he was more so less making fun of Usman for wanting Masvidal after Usman said he was tough to deal with. So yeah, I mean, Colby obviously, I think everyone wants to see Colby and Masvidal next. I think that's the fight to make. I think anything less than that is going to be disappointing, whether it's tough or the fight itself. And the other thing I'll say too, Ashley, and maybe you'll disagree or agree with me here, but I feel like Masvidal's kind of cooled off a little bit, right? He hasn't fought since July. I know he got a lot of flack for a lot of the political stuff with Trump as well. So I feel like that's his star power is not what it used to be. This isn't 2019, right, where Masvidal was the talk of the town. I feel like some of that's lost a little bit. And yes, Usman might get a pay bump, but I don't see it as significant pay bump compared to him, fighting Colby again. I think would make more sense, because that Colby finish was in the 5th round. Colby was in that fight, and whereas I feel like Masvidal wasn't. So what do you think of Masvidal's sort of stock right now in the grand scheme of things?
I still think he's relevant. I still think he's a fun fighter. Anytime you get on the internet, within a matter of hours, you're going to see his knockout against Ben Askren. Whether it's the fact that Ben Askren's going to fight a boxing fight or not, that plays role. Once you replay those things and you have that repetition of memory, you're like, oh yeah, this guy's no joke, right? Like, he can come out and finish if he wants to finish, whether it was lucky or not. He literally practiced that. So I think I think he's still up there, and I think it would be a fun fight for me. I honestly, I'm not too critical on his time off. The coronavirus has really added a bunch of new people, not giving you the opportunity to fight when you need to or who you want to. And especially for someone like Masvidal, you can't just be fighting someone that's, just new to the UFC, because then, yeah, you are going to lose your stock if you lose. So, yeah, I don't necessarily agree, but I also don't disagree. I think, just getting back in there, let's see him fight, and hopefully as a full camp, and there's no excuses.
We got producer Jordan with a question, actually. We're going to take his thoughts on.
Thank you.
There we go. Get the word in.
Thanks for indulging me. I have an interesting question, actually. Do you think that, given what's going on right now, that ESPN wants anything to do with the potential Usman and Colby Tough, where it's dominated by political and racial undertones, given what's going on with ESPN and Gina and Dana and Ariel right now? I just don't know. Obviously, controversy sells. It would be great entertainment. I just don't know if anyone at ESPN is signing up for that sort of next big commitment.
That's a great point. And sorry to interject there, and I'll get your thoughts in 1 second, but I did want to mention as well that they had that you remember the post-fight interview with Colby and Usman when Colby had beat Woodley, and it got a little, sort of steered off a little bit. Like, Colby's been, I think, again, like, I don't want to get too political here, but I feel like for the most part, Colby's been, just doing the trash talk he normally does. But remember he made that comment about the tribe thing, and it kind of took a little side turn, and you might be onto something there, producer Jordan. Like, I think that could be, in this day and age now, you got to be really careful about what's set out there. But sorry, Ashley, I interrupted you. interview, like a
No, I was
gentleman
going to
would.
say the same thing. It literally, these are things you have to think about. And I'm sure that this has already been one of the brainstorming ideas on their board, right? They have to be extremely careful, especially investing the time and money to bring the show back. We thought the show died. When we left Fox, I was not expecting to see Tough again, honestly. So I'm just excited for them to get back as a contestant on Tough. I think it's one of the best opportunities for any fighter to be able to kind of get a better view of just a one night than the Dana White's Container Series. I mean, it's still a great opportunity, right? But you're getting an opportunity to meet these people and know their life story and kind of see how they act in a scene where they're taken away from their families and teammates. So whoever they do decide to coach, I'm just glad they're bringing the show back. And I'm sure whether the matchups, Usman, Masvidal, Usman, Covington, Masvidal, Covington, like I really do believe that it's going to be a great show. And yeah, you just have to be really aware of these things that are sensitive subjects of 2021.
Very well said. I had this later in my notes. We might as well get into it now in terms of who's going to coach, the Ultimate Fighter. I mean, I think the leading candidate right now from what I'm seeing on my timeline is going to be Usman and Masvidal. And look, I think Masvidal being a part of Tough is a good idea because he can talk. He's, like you said, there's still a big fan base there. I think with Usman, it's almost the opposite. Like Usman's been this champion. I think his stock has certainly went up over the weekend with that performance, but I don't see Usman doing a lot of media. I even remember when he beat Woodley, there was like a period where he didn't do an interview for a couple months. And I just think that like, he's not really like getting his name out there the same way that some of these other fighters are. So I don't know how that will translate, like compared to say like a Colby and Masvidal, right? If they were to go toe to toe, but like you mentioned, maybe ESPN's thinking, hey, we're putting Tough on ESPN. We don't want a guy like Colby on there, although they can edit it, but still, I don't know. Like, is that what you're thinking as far as the coaches? Because that's what I'm hearing is that they're going to probably do Usman and Masvidal next for the coaches.
That's everything that you see on the timeline, that's what we see. You never know. So I do believe, you want someone that's going to be all about Tough is you have a whole interview process of seeing your personality. What persons are we going to have the show? And you imagine the coaching are the light of the show. So they're really going to want someone that's willing to go above and beyond. I can remember when my teammate was on the show and Roy Nelson was one of the coaches, how Roy didn't want to do anything. He didn't want to give signatures out at the end. He didn't want to do anything. And you don't want to see guys like that. You want to see people like Joanna, Young Jacek, and Claudia that are like getting into it all the time, that are, leaving you wanting to see what happens next week. It's a dramatic show, even though it's a real show. You have that reality aspect, but there's got to be those aspects of building and having these controversies and, these trials and pushes to the limit. So I think it's a great opportunity if they do Usman, that they, he really has to just kind of show up and be more charismatic than he is on most of his media. So.
While we're on the topic of Tough, I think the Ultimate Fighter is a bit different now than it was. Well, it's definitely different than it was when it first started, because even the first season they were doing like challenges to determine who like get to fight next. It was very weird, to the point of where like someone like Bonner or Mike Swick like didn't have to fight until later in the show. It was Mike Swick actually who I was thinking of. But one of the things that I think has changed since the Ultimate Fighter came out is that now you have these regional promotions like LFA and Titan and all these other promotions, Invicta, that are now on Fight Pass. So like everyone can watch it. But back when the Ultimate Fighter was going on, you really were getting the best prospects. And I feel like to some degree now, and not saying your season, because actually your season was one of my favorites, but I find that a lot of times when they're choosing who's going to be on that show, it's not necessarily the best fighters. It's, fighters that it's a combination of really good fighters, but also personalities, because they're thinking of that TV audience. Is that something you've noticed as well, just the last couple seasons, or do you feel like I'm off base here?
The thing is, like when we go through our interview process, you go in, you grapple, they pick all these people out. There's probably over 100 people that they pick. Then you go to the Fox interviews. The interviews is where they kind of see the personalities. So, whether you're one of the best fighters in the industry, if you don't have a personality, let's be honest, like how far does that get you actually in the UFC? They're not going to build you on star power if you can't have a conversation with media or, bring out, Tarek Saffiedine, one of the best fighters there is. He was very quiet. So like how many people really know about him now? I mean, now that he's retired, but he was he destroyed, like he was a great leader. He was a great fighter. He was just kept building that momentum, and I think that's one of the things with Tough. So I do think you're a little bit off just because they do push the personalities, right? But then at that point, depending on what show it is, like my show, we had to fight for our bed. So whether it got a lucky win or whatever, that personality still was winning their spot in the house. So it's not like there was a lack in technical fighting there.
Yeah, like
It
they weren't
literally
just
was,
choosing personalities. You're right. Actually, if I remember, you fought Jody Escobar, did you not? To get in the house?
yeah, I literally, the two people Sam Alvey told me not to fight. Guess who they were? And I don't get to pick. I don't know why he was telling me who I got to fight. He's like, whatever you do, I've researched all these girls. Just don't fight Jody Escobar. And then Kate, the second fight I had, what's her name? Kate, the English.
Jackson?
Yes, Kate
No.
Jackson.
Yeah.
He's like, just don't fight those two. One, Jody has a lot of experience in kickboxing, and then Kate's a lot bigger for the 115 division. And so, just steer away from those girls. Those were my two fights on Tough. Thanks, Sam. But yeah, so it's all about, they of course match us up to, they want the winners in, they want the losers out. Of course, I was probably not the one that they wanted in, but things happen and you win fights. So then you get these personalities on the show, and that's what builds the show. It would be a lot different if you did like a boot camp that wasn't televised, because how are you going to keep the audience's attention if you don't have those things to grab it, So all the people that were on the show had a huge backstory. Even the relationships between us, there was love relationships that probably shouldn't have happened. There was a lot of pranks and stuff because a lot of us, think we were comedians. So even just speaking for my show personally, I just believe, but you have Tatiana Suarez that won, Andrew Sanchez, two of the best fighters at the time, in my eyes. They were even coming to be great fighters now. So I think that it's a little bit of both, but there's definitely the technical side of the fighters that are making it in.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about your season. Well, first off, I remember your fight with Jody because it was a close fight, and I also remember too being like, "Oh, there's like a woman that trains at Dan Henderson's gym," because like you hadn't really heard of a lot of like female fighters coming out of that gym. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And Andrew Sanchez told me this after the fact, like he had no striking experience whatsoever when he was on that show, and he still managed to win. Or at least did he win or was he a finalist? I always get that mixed up.
No, he won.
He won. Yeah. So
won.
Roundtree lost. That was the one. I was always get that mixed up. But yeah, it was that was such an interesting season in my opinion. And they did a good job on that one because they had both men and women, which I thought added like an interesting dynamic there, right? So
yeah, it definitely breaks up the monotony of estrogen or,
yes.
just testosterone. But, it was funny actually, him being a striker and then getting put in with Khalil Roundtree, who's one of the gnarliest strikers in that division, is crazy. But yeah, it makes for a great show. And I've been one of the only females at Dan's gym for a long time. So I'm just excited to be able to train under a legend and have some great teammates. And I have a lot of little guys that beat me up. So
awesome. Last thing on UFC 258 that I have to mention, I want to get into it. We talked about Maycee Barber and everything, and I kind of feel like people once again are kind of writing her off, and I think I think it's a mistake here. Look, like I talked about it earlier. Max Holloway started his UFC career 4-3, and granted, Max was not saying he was going to be the youngest champion in the UFC, but still, I think a lot of people are very much into this whole recency bias thing, and I think you can't just write someone off after a couple losses. Look at Michael Bisping. I mean, I remember when Dan Henderson knocked him out at UFC 100, and a lot of people never thought he'd be UFC champion, and even then, he fought the likes of like Luke Rockhold and Tim Kennedy, and ended up losing those fights, but he still ended up going on to be a UFC champion. So I think you can't base too much off 2 losses. Look, everyone has their right to not like Maycee for what she said after, losing to Roxanne Modafferi, where she was sort of, kind of not giving Roxy enough credit, sort of talking more about the ACL injury instead. I can understand that, but you can't get upset on the prospect who's trying to be confident, trying to build their brand up. This is something that drives me nuts because it's either one or the other. Either you have a fighter who doesn't say anything, like Demetrius Johnson, who's one of the greatest fighters of all time, and people are like, well, I don't care about him, he's boring, whatever, and people aren't showing up to watch him fight. Or you have someone like Maycee who's trying to do a little self-promotion and, doesn't come out on top, but people can't wait to tell her that she's terrible and she's going to go to Bellator and all this stuff. So it's like, pick one or the other. I think Maycee Barber has plenty of time left. I think the key thing for her, though, is to just make sure she's with a camp going forward that can really focus on her and go there. She's at Valley Flow Striking in Chicago, working with Juliana Pena and some of the other fighters over there, Yair Rodriguez. I think that seems like a good fit. I thought she looked, didn't get destroyed in this fight, but I thought she made some improvements. I think we got to see how Maycee does with like a camp that she stays at, because she's been at a couple gyms. She's been at Factory X. She's been at Rufus Sport. She was at Jackson Wink, I think, initially when she first started getting into the sport. So I just, want to remind people, don't write Maycee Barber off just yet. She's 22 years old. I was doing plenty of dumb stuff when I was 22. So I think there's a lot of room for growth there. What do you think of that, Ashley?
Absolutely. I think even Dana came out and said that he still believes that she is championship quality. So I do believe the UFC is still backing her stock, and she's going to be put in to hopefully another fight that she, can get that win and get back on the right mind track. But changing gyms rough for anyone. And you really have to find the one that you click. And maybe that she just hadn't found that, she's, not in a good spot with any of these places. So hopefully she finds that. And maybe it takes more than one fight for her to get really comfortable. So yeah, just keep grinding. And, I wouldn't count her out. I think she's super young. I didn't even start fighting until I was 20, but she's in the UFC at 22. It's pretty awesome. So I think she's going to do great things in the future.
Well said. We got some news as well, some rumblings, not officially booked, but it sounds like there might be a possibility of us seeing TJ Dillashaw take on Uriah Faber. And you know what? I'm all for this because it doesn't impact some of the contenders in those divisions right now. My thing, and I ranted about this last week on the show, is that, TJ Dillashaw was suspended for steroids. I don't think he should come back and get an automatic title shot when steroids are involved. And whether he did it just for the one fight with Cejudo or not, I don't think it sets a good precedent when you have someone getting popped for PEDs. You've been out for a while. You shouldn't automatically get a title shot. Yes, I know he didn't officially lose the bantamweight title because he fought at flyweight, but still, there's guys like Corey Sandhagen and Rob Font and Jose Aldo who have been chomping at the bit. I mean, Aldo did have a title shot, but you know what I'm saying? There's other fighters in that division who have established themselves. They've been clean. I think they should get rewarded as opposed to a guy like Dillashaw who's coming in here. And that's why this Faber fight makes sense. They used to train together. There's some bad blood. I like a good old school pro wrestling storyline, like what we talked about earlier with, Covington and Masvidal. Like they clearly don't like each other. Dillashaw, for those who don't know, left Team Alpha Male years ago to go train with Dwayne Ludwig. It was messy. They had a whole tough season with Cody Garbrandt and Dillashaw there. Dillashaw ended up beating Cody Garbrandt a couple times. There's a bit of revenge there, I'm sure, for Uriah Faber. This makes a lot of sense to me. And yes, I would favor TJ Dillashaw in that fight, but I still think it's a fight that would get people interested, and that could headline a fight night card. It could be like a main card fight on a pay-per-view. I'm all for it, Ashley. What do you think? Do you think this is the fight to make?
I am 100% for that. I think you're 100% correct. You have to understand that when you abuse the power that we have, and especially in a place where you're as a title contender, a title holder, that you're going to get drug tested more than anyone. Like, in the fact that you want to, whatever the reason is, it's not acceptable, and it's not fair to anyone else in the division for you to come back after you've been punished, for you to come back and right into where you were. So I definitely think, everything that is made for this fight is one for the fans. And I think it would be a really interesting fight, and they could put so much momentum and so much publicity behind it that a fight night, main card, that I think that would be awesome. I think anybody that's watched the UFC, even before, would love to see that fight, because it's just so much turmoil, so much hate, so much, animosity. It would be great.
Before we go here, producer Jordan, if you have any questions, I'd love to hear them. But we should talk a little bit about this weekend's card. There aren't any strawweight fights in here. I just checked. There's the one flyweight fight between Shauna Dobson and Casey O'Neill, which is very interesting because O'Neill is making her debut. She's only got 5 fights, and Dobson once again is the underdog. We saw what happened last time. But actually, the fight I wanted to start with is your teammate Jared Bandera is going to be fighting Sergei Spivak. This is a rebook because Spivak had COVID. What can you tell us about Jared? And one thing I'll mention too, I didn't realize this till recently. You're actually the reason that Jared is rep by Iridium, because I know he was leaving his last management company. You sort of hooked it up. So
yeah, man, if we could do that and you have the relationships to connect, he has so much potential. And I'm so glad that he came to me. He actually came to me at practice one day and was like, "Hey, you think you could talk to your manager for me?" I'm like, "Say no more." I'm calling him right now. I literally on the mat texting him. And it's because, Jared is where he is. He should already be here. He's such a talented fighter from his ground game. He just got his black belt this year to, like, he's one of the guys that is like the athletic big guy, right? So you're like, how is this guy such a smart, and he's young too. He has so much room for growth, but he is standing in the rings with Hendo, Dom Reyes, like these guys, Sam Alvey. He's having these guys push him to a new level, and he's already now going to make his debut. So I'm so excited about this fight. I'm really proud of Jared for, keep grinding, because this guy had so many opportunities that he would have to go fight in South Africa just because he couldn't get a fight anymore. But the dude always wants to fight. And you cannot say that you don't want to see a heavyweight that can not only knock someone out, but he can also do jiu-jitsu. So, and on both sides of this fight, I think it's going to be a fun fight, but I think it's a great fight for him. So yeah, shout out to Jared. I'm really excited that he finally gets to make that debut. I know it's not a pay-per-view card, but at the end of the day, you're going to get more exposure on these kind of cards. And just like this card last week, and I think, it was a great card. The week before, it was like fire, like all these fight night cards, they just, I don't know, they come together and make magic. So I'm really excited for him. And this card this weekend. So.
And Jared's actually the underdog in this fight. It's kind of a fight where I think they're trying to figure out who the heavyweight prospect is they should push, because Spivak's actually 26. Bandera's a little bit older at 28. By the way, shout out Jordan. I got to mention this. Spivak fighting out of Moldova, our inside joke with that as well, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, I'm excited for this fight. There's a couple fights on here, a lot of heavyweight fights on here. There's the Bandera fight. There's the Arlovsky and Tom Aspinall fight. There's the Oleinik and Chris Daukaus fight. And then, of course, the main event. I am curious your thoughts on the main event. We've got the Black Beast, Derek Lewis, one of the funniest guys in the sport, but he's got a tough matchup against Curtis Blades. Blades is the biggest favorite on the card right now. If you go to blitzbet.eu, it is he's almost like a 4-1 favorite. How do you look at the main event? Because I see Blades just winning this fight with his wrestling and his overall athleticism. How do you see the fight?
And I don't know. I think Derek Lewis had a tough opponent in his last win, Arlovsky, right? The boa constrictor, and I don't think he was a favorite in that fight either. But, this guy comes in and he was fighting a couple fights ago and losing the whole fight in one punch knockout. So, that's the funny and awesome things about heavyweights. You can't count anybody out. Just because you're a good wrestler doesn't mean you can't get an uppercut when you try to shoot. So I think if there is a fight to bet for, this is the one. And Derek Lewis, I have such I love Derek Lewis. He's funny. Ever from the time I was on Tough, they let us watch one fight, and it was one of his first fights, or maybe second fights, and he was asking about being on main card. So it was kind of like an inside joke between me and JJ Adderich, because pretty much that's my best friend, but that's all we had to go off of when you're living in a tough house and you don't get to watch TV. So when we got signed to the UFC, within a week's notice, we both got our first fight on a week's notice on the same card. And guess who was headlining? Derek Lewis. So, we've always had this thing for Derek Lewis, and I think he's an awesome fighter. He's funny outside the cage, but the dude is putting in work and he looks great. He's getting better. He's taking his conditioning more seriously. He still, I think, has more room to improve, but you can't deny the guy. So I'm excited about this fight.
Yeah, he has that one punch knockout for that fight you were referencing. Actually, was the Alexander Volkov fight, where Volkov was literally on his way to winning a decision, and Lewis, we talked about the Hail Mary with Julian Marquez. This was even more of a Hail Mary. I think it was 1 second left in the fight. Lewis had knocked out Volkov, and Volkov's actually never been finished in the Octagon, so that's even more impressive of a win. The only thing that I'm concerned with is that he's 36. He's fighting a guy who's pretty athletic in Curtis Blades. We'll see. I mean, Blades has been knocked out before. We saw Ngannou finish him twice, actually. This is only 2 career losses. So really excited for this main event. And good fight to, figure out the next sort of contender, sort of waiting in the wings, because, of course, we got this logjam right now with Stipe fighting Ngannou, the rematch. And you got John Jones, who's probably fighting the winner. So either way, it's going to situate these guys pretty well. I wanted to get your thoughts on the co-main event. Again, not your division, but Caitlin Vieira, Yana Kunitsakaya. Vieira, of course, if you remember, back in 2019, had that look like she was going to fight Nunes, and then she fights Irene Aldana, gets knocked out, and then that sort of set her back a little bit, but she did rebound in her last fight against Sajara Eubanks. Kunitsakaya, pretty good record overall in the UFC. The one loss she's had recently was to Aspen Ladd, which was a fight I thought she was winning, and then Ladd literally came out of bat out of hell in that third round and knocked her out. So how do you like this fight? Because I think Vieira is almost a 2 to 3 to 1 favorite in this one.
Oh, yeah. So speaking of the Aspen Ladd, it was a big thing about what her coach said to her in the corner between the second and third round, because she came out like a different person, different fighter. Yana's been doing really well. I think, her, whether it's her relationship and having a new training gym with Iago Santos or
ATT. Yeah, good point.
Yeah. It could be that, mentally she's in a better place. Who knows? I was on the card with her when she had to face Cyborg. So, and I saw the fear in this girl's eyes from the time we were in the back to, so she's changed a lot. I think it's going to be actually, I'm excited about this fight a lot. I think it's going to be a really good fight. I think Caitlin is going to be, a tough challenge for Yana, but it definitely is going to be a great matchup to see who, is going to get up in the rankings and see who's going to be next. And I mean, this is 35, correct?
Yeah, 35. Yeah. So,
and
we don't know what's happening with Nunes, right? Because she's got the Anderson fight. I mean, who knows what her future is going to look like? She's a mom, parent now, right? So it's kind of tough to say what she wants to do. But good fight in the co-main event this weekend. You guys want full picks on this card or a great breakdown? Always recommend the betting show here on Line Movement. Dan Levi, always killing it every week. You can check that out on Thursday. That's usually when the show is up. And keep tabs up for that one. Before we get out of here, though, producer Jordan did remind me we had a bit of news last week. Dan Ige has lost his opponent. Ryan Hall is out of his fight with Dan Ige due to an injury, which is a bummer because Ryan Hall just does not fight that much, unfortunately, and I don't blame him. He's got a good record. He's got an interesting style. So Ige without an opponent. I said this on Twitter, and I still stand by it. I think the fight to make is Dan Ige and Shane Burgos. They both, they both are exciting fighters. They've been linked to fights in the past. Burgos is coming off a loss, I believe, to Josh Emmett in his last fight. Ige is coming off a loss to Kelvin Gaslam. I think it makes sense. What do you think of that matchup, or do you think someone else is better suited for Ige?
No, actually, I like that matchup. I think Shane's opportunity coming off a loss and a loss is a loss, right? So you have to get those fights matched up. And, Ryan Hall, I actually didn't know this, but Ryan Hall is such a fun fighter to watch because, like, this guy's going to come for your ankles like a chihuahua. So it's kind of nice to see, like, when you have these styles that these guys really rely on. But, hey, get better. And I hope that the Shane Burgos fight is maybe something that they would match up.
And I forgot, they actually both have lost to Kelvin Gaslam. Cater finishing Burgos in the third round back in 2018, and Ige losing to Cater in his last fight. So you want to do a little MMA math for the matchmaking. Either way, it's an exciting fight on paper. So I think that's sort of the fight to make here. Before we get out of here, Ashley, you sort of talked about it there. I know you're kind of waiting and seeing for a fight. Is the plan to just kind of stay on standby in case a short notice thing happens, or do you want a full camp? Like, what's sort of the game plan going forward? Obviously, you're in the gym every day training.
Yeah, I'm in the gym every day. I've already let the matchmaker make know that, my weight's good. And if you have that last minute dropout, call your girl. I'm only a couple hours from Vegas. So if it's in Vegas, I will take it. So I am eager to get back in there. And, I have some issues with, like, one of my coaches was in Brazil for a little while. And then now, so I'm training full time and getting everything right for that last minute call, hopefully. So.
Awesome. Ashley, this was awesome. Love to have you back on here again. It's better than a typical interview, right? We do something a little bit different, talk about the news. Definitely see a future broadcaster in your cards if you ever want to go that route. But in the meantime, I know you got some people to thank, probably some sponsors, maybe some social media you want to plug. I'll give you the floor here.
Yeah, thank you for my management. They're amazing. They pretty much represent all badasses, Iridium Sports. But even more, I would like to thank my team, my coaches, everybody that's, supported me through this journey. And, right now, the time down is, the time to really rebuild myself and get back in there and get those technical fixes in my game. So huge shout out to my chiropractor that keeps me healthy because my neck goes out a lot. No, Dr. Toy, and, just my dynamic fitness, my strength and conditioning coaches really up in my game on that side of it. And if you guys want to follow me for some laughs, you can go to Instagram and follow me at Spider Monkey Yoda, or, I need to get better at Twitter. But Twitter is a lot of words, and I like to laugh at videos. So, but Twitter, I'm Ashley Yoder, MMA. Yeah, there's a lot of memes on there. So, yeah, I need to get better at that. But yeah, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook too, Ashley Yoder MMA as well. And I hope that I get to come back soon. So thank you for having me.
This was awesome. Good insight. Even like I said, we even got the dating stuff in there with Julian, which is good to get your perspective. Finally getting a woman talking about this as opposed to all these men who are on Twitter trying to be relationship experts. But anyways, shout out to my producer Jordan, who always puts this together. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. Like I said, if you guys want a UFC 2 Vegas 19 preview, the guys over at the Line Movement Betting Show on Thursday do an outstanding job. We always do this show every Monday, usually on the channel here, so you guys can check that out. We'll be recapping UFC Vegas 19 a week from today. Follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Lynch on Sports. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you guys on Monday, and hope you guys and girls have a great rest of your week and weekend.
Thank you.